he always buys a 20-pound turkey.
It sounds
Grocery
like he might have
stores.
enough from the first one left over for
Oh
Christmas.
God. So you got all that meat, and then we're going to take the carcass and make soup out of it for the next day. And of course, then we got desserts. We got
Pumpkin
like a sampler
pie.
cheesecake. So it was a little more expensive than their normal pumpkin pie because they actually have pumpkin pie for like $4. This thing's mammoth. It's like, this thing's got to be 18 inches across. And
Wow.
it's like that thick. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're pretty good too. But yeah, God, it's ridiculous.
Well, we're going to get this show on the road before I get hungry and have to get up
Sounds
to get
good.
something to
No.
eat. On this episode of the podcast, we have a little bit of news about Camera Plus. We talk about the Photos app and some of the adjustments you can do in the editing suite. Also, do I put mushrooms in my hot chocolate? I don't know about that. All this and more coming up. It's Monday, November 20th. This is the iPhoneography podcast. I'm Greg McMillan, and I'm joined by my, if I have it my way, my soon-to-be dinner host on Thanksgiving, Dave Bodner.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Oh, good. I say soon-to-be because
Yeah.
I feel like driving down to Pittsburgh to go for Thanksgiving dinner because we
Yeah,
were
we
just
got
talking
room.
to
We got
Dave,
room.
you were just telling me about what you got and what you're gonna have, and in fact,
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to drool. And I
Yeah.
mean, so we've had our Thanksgiving already.
Right,
It was
right.
in October, and you know, it was good and everything else. But boy, oh boy, I could sure use use some more turkey. It was good. But anyway, I digress. So how are you, guy?
Hanging in there, hanging in there. We had
Attaboy.
our season, snap a little bit. So we were not in the deep freeze, but we had our snap where it's unless you're a little on the crazy side. So I'm talking myself. It's not necessarily shorts weather during the day. For a while there, it was like, oh, it's November and it's like 60 some degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh
It's
yeah,
almost shorts
yeah.
weather still. But
Yep.
no, no, like today was bare, it was like upper 40s, maybe 50 at most. So,
Oh, that's
and
balmy compared to what we've had. We're
oh,
around the
I'm
freezing
sure.
mark.
Oh, yeah,
Like I woke up this morning, I
yeah.
looked out in the backyard, and there was probably a good eighth of an inch of ice on the bird bath. It was pretty cold last night. So, but
Oh,
hey, it's Canada and it's November and
yeah.
getting into late November already. So, but so tonight
Uh,
we are going to talk about a news item, and then we're going to talk about the um, editing features of the Photos app that's on everybody's iPhone. Um, and then after that, our recent pictures, our recent photos. So stay tuned for that. So anyway, the news item is something that I've stumbled upon with Camera Plus, and Camera Plus has new owners. The folks that initially developed and created that app no longer have anything to do with it. And they were late night soft. Well, they were tap tap tap, and then they changed their name to Late Night Soft, and now I think they're just called Late Night with their new app that they have called Photon, which is a lot like Camera Plus was or is. And so the reason this is news is because when I got my iPhone 15 Pro Max, I didn't put any apps on it from before. I'm putting them on as I go. And for whatever reason, I wanted to put Camera Plus on it. And when I had Camera Plus before, I had bought into everything, so I should be able to restore my purchases. Well, I can't do that. Um, don't know what the heck's going on, and it's frustrating, isn't it, Dave?
mm-hmm. Oh, it is. It is, especially when there's no communication.
Exactly.
If you go to the app store and it would have a note, or you know what? They know you bought the app. They have that information.
Hmm.
So they could easily send an email or put something out on their social or put something somewhere and say, by the way, we are new owners and we're having just a little bit of difficulty with past purchases, but don't worry, it's being worked on.
Yeah.
And absolutely nothing. And the thing is, you don't realize there's something wrong because I use Camera Plus not necessarily to take pictures,
Mhm.
but to use their filters. I like their filters.
Yeah.
And so I like, I even was like, oh, I'll try this in Camera Plus and see how it turns out. And the nice thing is you can layer filters and change the strength and put one filter on top of another and put frames. And okay, so I got the camera, I got the photo how I wanted. I want to hit save and hit done. And then it said pro on it.
Yeah.
So it's
Like,
like, oh, I didn't notice that because it's so hidden because the word pro is written over, so it doesn't really stand out. And I
mhm.
just put time. I mean, it wasn't like hours, but still, I put time and effort into getting a photo the way I liked it. And now all of a sudden it's like, no. And it was aggravating.
Yeah.
It really
Um,
was.
like when you open Camera Plus after you just download it, you can shoot in auto. It's fine. But as soon as you try to pick another mode, like macro or whatever, bang, you get the splash screen that says,
Mm-hmm.
subscribe for this much or that much or whatever. But in the top right corner, it says restore. Okay, so I hit restore and I get a little pop-up that says it's unavailable at this time. Well, first you have to put your Apple ID password in. That's no big deal. But then, and if I sound weird, it's because I got a lozenge in my mouth there. But if you so once you get your Apple ID password in there, um, it comes up with a pop-up says it's not available at this time. Please try again later. I've been trying for a couple of weeks now and it's still not fixed. So I don't know what's going on. I I went. Well, I had to look up the developer. The new developer is called in the App Store. It's listed as Heavy Plum Apps. So I did an internet search for Heavy Plum Apps and got to their website, and it basically says that they're what did it say now? Something about being it's almost like Bending Spoons who bought Focus. They do a bunch of things under their brand or whatever.
Hmm.
These guys, I think it's like they kind of curate these apps or whatever, look after these apps or whatever. I don't know if they intend on I don't know if they intend to further develop it or what they plan to do, but they got to do something because if they don't, um, Camera Plus is going to be dead to a lot of people unless of course you want to renew your like a subscription or whatever.
Hmm.
But if they don't fix the restore function, they're going to lose a lot of people, me
Yeah.
included.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not going to be worth the effort to do anything.
Yeah.
It really won't.
And I was using Camera Plus as, some of the stuff I did in my book that I'm working on. It's still coming. Yes,
Hmm.
it's still coming. But so, you know, spoiler alert, I'm taking anything to do with Camera Plus out of the book because if I can't use it and if they're not gonna, get their poop in a group here, then sorry, Heavy Plum, I'm just not going to include it in the book.
Yeah.
I should be able to restore my purchases and use it
Hmm.
to its fullest, but if I can't even go to the macro mode, then it's no good to me. And I'm not going
Yeah.
to buy it again. I'm not going to get a subscription or anything like that to something that I've already paid for. The same thing kind of happened with Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro changed hands, and the new owners totally disregarded what you've done, what you paid for in a way,
Mm.
not completely. And I'll explain that. Um, but what they've done is they've put a paywall up, and it's a ridiculous paywall. It's like $2.99 a week or some stupid thing. I forget what the numbers are. Mind you, there is a legacy version of Filmic Pro, and I bought into everything at one time, so I had all the features and everything, and I can still
Mhm.
use that old legacy program. But anything new that comes along is not going to be put into it. So, like Apple ProRes and or uh, the Apple Log and all that stuff, that'll be in the newer one, but where you're paying for it, but it won't be in the old one. But I mean, that's why there's Blackmagic Cam. I think that was called Blackmagic Camera that DaVinci Resolve
Yeah,
put out or
yeah,
whatever. But anyway,
yeah. The black magic.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I'm rambling. So that's basically the kind of the long and short of it. I mean, with Photon, which is made by the people who used to make Camera Plus, it it doesn't have the editing suite in it that you were using, which is kind
Right.
of a downer too. So I don't know. If you use these apps and you like them and everything else, um, you could be disappointed with Camera Plus. Um, Camera Plus Legacy, it still has the editing suite. Um, I don't use them not enough to know everything about them, but I mean, but I think the new version probably had better stuff in it. So
Oh yeah, it definitely did. It definitely was a lot better. The UI was so much smoother and cleaner.
yeah,
The legacy feels old. It just you
yeah,
look at it, you're like, oh, this feels like an old piece of software that hasn't been touched in a long time. But
yeah.
honestly, it almost smells like when someone comes in, buys a restaurant or a store, the original owners who actually had equity and cared about the store itself went away, and it's someone who's there to see how much money can we get off of this.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, all business is there to make money. We all know that. If a business doesn't
Hmm.
make money, it goes out of business. It's
Oh,
that
sure.
simple. But if your focus is on making money and not making a product, you will lose your customers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you make a product that people want and there's a desire for and it fills a need for them or a want, you will make money as
Hmm.
long as you're responsible with spending it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's right.
But if all you do is think, how can I make money? How can I make money? You'll be turning into Sears and Kmart,
Hmm. Yeah.
which I think there's like one Kmart left in the US.
Oh, really?
And I think the Sears are pretty much, yeah, they're Sears and Kmart are pretty much wiped out
Yeah.
because they went from we're a store that gives people what they want to being bought out by private equity whose main thought was, well, we have all this real estate, so we'll spin off the stuff that makes money into another company, we'll sell it off and we'll make money that way, and the stores we don't care about.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden no one cared about going to these stores anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, it's a shame, and I mean, but I mean, some people probably were subscribers to Camera Plus, and if that's the case,
mhm.
then they probably still work, and no problem at all. This just happened to me because I changed phones and went the
New
way I did it,
phones,
but
yeah.
went about it the way I did, and when I went to reinstall it, that's what happened. So, I mean, hopefully they'll fix it. That's all I could say. So we're going to move on to now I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times in the past here about doing a show on the editing features of the Photos app. The Photos app is something that every iPhone comes with. It's where your pictures reside once you've taken them. And I don't think we've ever really gone through the different adjustment things in photos to explain what they do and how they work.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. Now, I got this document, this PDF from iPhone Life. They did a live webinar thing one time, and they said, okay, here's a link to what we talked about basically, and you can just go download it. So I did, and Dave and I each have a copy, and um,
No,
it goes
Greg,
through.
before we go into detail though,
Mhm.
before we go into details here, the reason why someone may want to use the built-in photo editing instead of Lightroom, Darkroom, whatever, Photomate or whatever third-party app. There's a couple things that if you go into a third-party app, like if you use Lightroom Mobile, it creates a copy
Right.
of the photo, which can be a pain because then you have the original and you have the copy. But even if you have something like Snapseed, which can do edit and undo it, or Polar undoes it, you lose live photos. So if you take live
Oh yeah.
photos,
Hmm.
you import it in these third-party apps, you lose that. But if you edit it in the app itself, you keep the live photo, and that allows you to, if you want to, stitch a few live photos together to make a video out of it.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
for the memories feature, it will actually say, oh, that's a live video, that's a live photo. I'll make a little video as part of your memories out of it.
Yeah.
So that keeps it there. Also,
Yeah.
it's quicker and easier because it's literally you take a photo, you can click on the photo on the bottom left in your camera app. If you, I'm assuming you take it in, you take it in the default camera, you can go
Hmm.
right there, do a quick little edit, and then move on. So it's a
Yeah. Oh yeah.
lot quicker. It's a
Yeah.
lot
It's
quicker.
quicker. It's more convenient. It's free. It comes with the phone, and it does a really good job.
Yeah.
So, um, so
Doesn't
this
do raw. So if you want to do raw, you can't do it there.
well, you
Limitation.
can.
Well, you can
You
edit the
can
program. Yeah,
because
you can edit it raw, but like
you're editing the
Lightroom and
raw,
other
but when
things.
you share it,
Right.
it just automatically turns it into a JPEG or
Right.
a hike, whatever you have your
Yeah.
setting at.
Yeah.
Um, it does a lot of things under the hood that
Oh yeah.
I couldn't even tell you how it works half the time. But I mean, it's so slick at what it does. I shoot more raw than I do non-raw. And
Mm-hmm.
if I put a photo on Glass or Instagram or whatever, even if it's just a raw, I don't shoot both. I just shoot just the pro raw.
Mm-hmm.
It'll it'll it converts it and puts it up there. I mean, it does it all under the hood,
Mm-hmm.
and it does it so fast. It's unbelievable. But so this document is basically two columns. One is how photo editing effects work, and what it does is it goes through. So if you open up a photo in Photos to edit it, and you hit edit, and now you've got your adjustments along the bottom of the screen. You've got
Mm-hmm.
exposure, brilliance, highlights, shadows, and so on. Um, it's going to have, I thought I had this note somewhere, but I guess I don't. Oh, I know where I put it. I put it in a text to you, Dave.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so it has all the adjustments except the one for warmth, definition, noise reduction, and vignette. So those are not on this list, but Dave and I will use our utter brilliant minds and give a quick rundown of what those sliders do. Um,
Uh,
so I'll start with exposure.
well,
And
before we get to exposure,
yeah.
real quick, Greg, the one other thing that's missing is auto.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Like the magic wand. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is the auto,
Okay, so we'll start with
which
that.
makes,
You
yeah,
could start with that then, because that's actually the first one that you come to, right?
yeah, yeah. And the nice thing about auto is when you click auto, it makes, now this is Apple's AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, trying to use its own preference to make a photo look a certain way. It may not be what you have in mind, But one thing that is nice is when you hit auto, it makes adjustments on all these other tweaks, but it
Yeah.
keeps it there. So you can see, oh, it did this to brilliance, it did this to highlights, it did this
Yeah.
to shadows. And you can say, you know what, overall it's okay, but I want to deal with the shadow, or I want to turn down my highlights. And you can do that without, but the nice thing is any of these adjustments, like with auto, you click auto, you get to slide it in terms of changing how auto works.
Yes.
So you can use
Basically
a
like the
slider
strength of
under.
it.
Exactly. Or even
Yeah.
if you want to consider almost like the lightness, darkness of auto. So you can
Yeah.
actually just scroll the auto left and right and see if it's something that, kind of if you like it or not. And the nice thing is, if you don't like it, you can always undo or click auto again, and it gets rid of what you did.
Yeah. It just puts everything back to the way they were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, the auto is a great place to start. I know Matt Hoffman starts
Mm-hmm.
in Polar. He always hit that auto button first and just to see what
Yep.
it give him and then goes from there. I've done it in Lightroom Mobile and it kind of just gives you a good starting position anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So exposure, basically it mimics the effect of increasing or decreasing the amount of light striking film type of thing. So I think everybody knows what exposure is. Um, so in photos, it tends to affect the highlights more than it does the mids or the dark. It could introduce grain and clipping, or losing detail. Um, so use this one with caution. Um, it's useful. So there's two columns on this document I was going to say earlier. There's how to edit or how the editing effects work, and then on the other side of it is when to use that. So exposure it's good for correcting the auto exposure of an image. Maybe if it's too bright or too dark or whatever, or if you got a high contrast image. Uh, so I mean, I don't always adjust the exposure slider because, quite frankly, the iPhone's pretty good at exposing. Unless there's, say you shoot a scene where it's kind of getting near sunset or whatever, and the sun might be just a little overblown, or part of the clouds that are in front of the sun could be overblown. And
Mm-hmm.
in that case, I might bring the exposure down, and then I'd make a few other adjustments to bring some of the other stuff back. Um, but yeah, be careful when you use the exposure slider. Uh, and another thing I'll mention before we continue through these is take the slider and go all the way back and forth with them to really get a good idea of what they do. And then, once you see what it does and how it affects the image, then you can just start making slight movements, to get your image looking the way you want. So, just have fun with it. Go crazy with the sliders but once you want to make your adjustments, you just be careful how much you move them. So next, Dave, we got brilliance.
Yep. Brilliance, which brightens or darkens the image without allowing the whites to clip. Darks may clip if brilliance is lower. In other words, it gets so dark you're just kind of losing detail.
Right.
They list this as a fan favorite, useful for increasing overall shine and light of midtones, reducing grayness without changing colors. So this can do a big help for if it's a little bit of an overcast day or like a haze, if you will. Brilliance can help get rid of that haze. It's
Yeah,
not
it's not as
as
you're gonna say it's just what I was thinking.
I mean, yep, yeah, I would say it's not as good as the haze
Yes,
in Lightroom
exactly.
Mobile or other things, but it does a pretty decent job. But that's remember what we always say about Apple: their built-in stuff will be good for 90% of people.
Exactly.
So it's
Yep.
enough to say, hey, it's a little hazy, bump the brilliance up. Oh, the haze is gone. It's not completely gone like Lightroom would do, but it does a good job about cleaning, or sometimes you want to lower the brilliance,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that may work out better depending on what you have in mind. And again, the great thing is it's so easy to change the values
Oh yeah.
in terms of,
And
and when you change the felt values, they will give you a number in the middle.
yes. And what I was going to add, excuse me, is you can tap on the dial where the number is to turn the effect on and off to
Mm-hmm.
see what it would be like if you didn't do that effect at all, rather than try to dial it back to zero.
Yeah.
So you can do that with as many of the adjustments that as you want. I just got to get a drink of water.
Now, one thing is if you tap it off when you want to tap it back on, unfortunately, it does not put it back to where you were. It puts it back at zero.
Not in my experience.
Oh, okay.
I've adjusted them.
Okay, I see it here. Yeah. No, no, I see that too. I just didn't want to mind bringing it back to zero. So my mistake on that one. And I'm not sure what
Yes.
happened there,
Oh yeah.
but no,
Yeah.
you are right. Yeah.
So what happens when you tap it to turn it off? That basically puts it at zero. But when you
Mm-hmm.
tap it again to turn it on, it puts it back where you adjusted it.
Where you adjusted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
For whatever
So,
reason, I just tried it and it put it back at zero. I'm like, that's kind of
oh
weird.
really? Huh.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure what happened there.
Could have been a fluke. So yeah, like it's a great adjustment um to really help with getting the look and feel of the image to your liking. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't clip the highlights. Once you clip the highlights, man, that's just ruins a photo. It's a lot better. I think it's more aesthetically better if the shadows are clipped, because some a lot of times it doesn't matter. But when the highlights are clipped, the only time that really matters is if you're doing a high key image where there's a lot of white, that type of thing. But in most cases, that's not what you're trying to do. So, um, it is a very, very handy tool. I use it probably just with every time I edit a photo. So next we got highlights. Now this only brightens the brighter parts of the image. It doesn't really touch so much the midtones or the shadows. It's just the brighter parts of the image. And, so our document here, it has some stuff about histograms, which I don't know why it would even mention that, because the histogram's not available in photos. I kind of wish they would add it, but it's not available. You need to go to an app like Darkroom or Lightroom Mobile, an app that has that function where you can turn it on. But excuse me. So when do you want to adjust the highlights? Well, if you've got an overexposed area or a really bright area like a t-shirt or the sky, like I mentioned earlier, and you want to bring that down a bit. Now, something I've noticed in my experience is that if you go too far with it, things start to look a little gray. So you want to be careful of that. But basically, I mean, a lot of these are pretty plain and simple. And, Dave and I are going to probably explain too heavily what they really do, but we want to make sure people understand what they do.
Yeah. And
So for highlight,
I would say
yeah,
for
go ahead.
highlights and the next one, shadows, is the main reason I don't use exposure. Because because most of the time, if I want to lower what I would what most people would think of the exposure, it's really the bright areas which are just too bright. But I don't want to make the dark areas darker. I only want to hit the
Right.
high areas.
Yeah.
And I found that the highlight if I reduce the highlights, it will help pop the colors a little bit more too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If you're, I know we're in stick season now, but for fall colors, if the highlights, your individual colors seem to pop more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a way you can kind of say, oh, I did these areas which are bright. I want to make the bright areas a little less bright, But the dark areas I don't want to touch, highlights is great for that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And on the other side of the coin, shadows.
Yep. Yep. And
Um,
that only brightens or darkens the lower third. So if you have
yeah, yeah,
air
the
and
lower third of the histogram, which
a
is
histogram, yeah.
obviously the darker
Yeah.
areas. Yeah.
Yep. Which like a few of the pictures I've taken on like the riverfront
Hmm.
and the sky, let's say the sky's decent, but I want to just brighten the tree where the trees are. Now, I don't
Right.
want to touch the sky. The sky's bright enough, or I may even have to bring the sky down using highlights, but I want to boost up the dark areas a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to make them a little bit brighter so you can see some detail. That's when I boost up the shadows.
Yeah.
And I think we both agree that you got to be careful with the highlights and the shadows, that you can make it, unless you're looking for that, I should say, unless you're looking for it, you can make it look like bad HDR
Yeah. Yeah.
by boosting one too high and bringing the other one down too much. Now, if that's the look you want to do, go for
Oh,
it.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but I would say most people don't want to do that.
Yeah. And the
So
shadow adjustment is good for exactly what it's called, shadows, right? Like
mhm,
if you're shooting on a bright sunny day where you got really harsh shadows, um, say the shadow of a tree, well, say your dog is on the grass in the shadow of a tree, and everything else is really bright, well, you can bring up that shadow a little bit to the point where you can see the dog and still have everything else look the way it was. Like it's again, take these sliders and move them around and adjust them like crazy to see what they do, and then make your final adjustment. But yes, highlights and shadows, like you say, Dave, you can go too far with them, and things can go sour real quick. So next is contrast, and this kind of does what highlights and shadows do, but all in one.
mhm,
And what it does is it makes the brighter areas brighter and the darker areas darker. So this can be handy though if you have a photo of, say, a tree or something on an overcast day where everything is kind of bland looking and you want to give it more punch. You can increase the contrast by darkening the shadows and brightening the lights, um, just to give that. It's so easy to think of this when you think of a histogram, but if for those who don't use a histogram, it's kind of hard to imagine. But you're taking your exposure latitude and you're expanding it. You're giving it more latitude,
mhm,
and what that does is that just uses more of the um, not just the mid-range uh, tones of the image, but it expands those out to into the shadows and the highlight areas, giving your photo a lot more drama and intensity.
mhm.
But again, same with the highlights and shadows, you can overdo it,
Right.
right? By taking it too far.
Yeah. And if you're not one who's used to histograms, think high contrast is a bright sunny day with
Yeah.
no
Oh yeah.
clouds.
Yeah.
And low contrast is like an overcast day where the shadows are kind of, they're not dark, they're just kind of there, to like a day where you don't even cast a shadow outside.
Hmm.
So the difference between light and dark isn't as much versus a bright sunny day where you step outside and your shadow is dark and the bright
Yeah.
area is bright and it's hard
Yeah.
to see because of your eyes dealing with the bright and the dark. And this is something you can adjust in the photo now.
Yeah. That's right. So next we have brightness, Dave.
Yeah, brightness, like brilliance, applies a targeted clipping resistance or darkening, but with more color. So if you lower your brightness, you will get that extra vibrant dark color. So if you have that are the dark, rich colors and you really want to bring out your dark, rich colors, you can tune down the brightness and this will give you that really dark, rich color.
Yeah.
Or if you
Yeah.
wanted to tone it down, or and maybe the color's a little too much, you can raise it up and then it just, you know, lighten an image and lighten the color a little bit there.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that Jack Hollingsworth really likes to do is just decrease the brightness just a little bit because it just like you say, it gives it more punch in the color.
Mhm.
Um, and it is so true. I find I find I'm doing that kind of on a consistent basis when I edit in photos. I do dial the brightness
Mhm.
down, even if it's just a couple of notches.
Yeah.
But it does make a difference. And of course, how much of a difference it makes depends on the image. So black point, what this does is it increases what is defined as absolute black. So if you dial it down, you can cause, you can make dark grays turn into black, or if you see there's too much black in the image, like say in shadow areas, you can bring up the black point and it
Mhm.
makes them look a little more gray. And what I've found me myself doing is if I do that, if I got too much black areas in the image and I want to, decrease that intensity, I'll bring the blacks up, but then sometimes I'll bring up the contrast a little bit to give it a little more contrast, but still keep the detail in the black areas.
Mhm.
So some of these work with um, with each other in different ways like
Mhm.
that. Um, so the when to use side of the document here, it says it's useful for making dark parts of an image really pop with true black. So yeah, if you got like you said, Dave, an overcast day where there's not so much you know contrast, well, you can bring the blacks down
Mhm.
and it will give it more contrast without you know uh
Touching
without
other
giving
parts
it.
of the image too.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, without affecting the mid range and the
Mhm.
brighter parts of the image. Yeah. So again, play with it, move it up and down, see what you can do with
Mhm.
it. And next we have saturation.
Which is another warning one.
Hmm.
Um, this is increasing, it subtracts grays from colors, and this is literally you're just boosting the color all the way around. And this is something that you can get in trouble with very, very quickly if
Oh
you
yeah.
just a little bit on saturation, and all of a sudden you got it so boosted that it's overwhelming. And back in the day, now it's better now. Back in the day, this was the big Apple versus Samsung picture
Yeah.
debate,
Oh
because
yeah.
Samsungs were always saturated and they looked great on the screen, but they weren't true to life. They were saturated. It's literally, if you have a monitor and just turn up the saturation, you'll notice things just pop at you, like TVs in the stores. When you go in, they always have the saturation extra boosted so it stands out.
Oh
But
sure.
then
Yeah.
you get things like reds tend to really peak out, and everyone looks like they're exceptionally hot because their faces are red if they're white.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, reds are the worst when it comes to, I think, bleed over
Hmm.
versus like a blue or a brown, that if you
Yeah.
overdo the saturation, it'll actually bleed over into other parts of the image. So that one, I rarely use saturation unless I'm going for an effect. But if I'm
Yeah.
just going for like a tweak of an image, I don't touch saturation at all. It's just too
Yeah.
dangerous.
If I do a saturation adjustment, it's generally not that much. Uh, just for those reasons, you don't want to, you don't want to make it into clown puke, for lack of
Exactly.
better terms.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, well, basically along with saturation is vibrance, which is the next adjustment.
Mhm.
Um, this only so this was something that I never really knew too much about. But what it does is it applies a saturation boost or reduction, depending on which way you go, to just the midtones. So it has a lot less effect than an overall saturation adjustment does. And I think in my experience, what this does is if you want to add a little more color to your image, especially if there's people in it, it it will um, doesn't really affect the skin tones. So this is listed as a fan favorite too. It says essentially a smarter version of saturation because it doesn't have as adverse effects on skin tone. So,
Well,
if you want
and
to,
I'm gonna jump in real quick.
Mhm.
And I would say this, and just based on experience, this is white people skin tones.
You're
I
probably
have
right.
because I have not had enough experience taking pictures of Latinos
Yeah.
or Asian or people who have ancestry from Asia
Hmm.
or a lot of African Americans. Just it's a limit of mine. I need to get better at it. Where to say that will Vibrance take someone who's African American and mess with their skin tone at all?
Yeah. Yeah.
We
I'd
do
be
know
interested in knowing.
we do know that both Apple, Samsung, and all these developers are getting better
Yeah.
about testing on people who aren't white,
Hmm.
but it's still not, they don't do a large enough cross section of people when they test and develop.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. But
Literally, it's getting better, but it's
yeah.
still not where it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, again, the 90-90 thing comes into
Yeah.
play there too, I think. But so, I
Mm,
mean, if anybody can capture an image of, you know, someone from a different ethnic background than, say, Dave or I, um, try it out and see if it does have an effect on the skin tone. Um, who knows? Maybe it does some sort of facial recognition and realizes that that's a person's skin, and maybe it'll leave it alone. I don't know. I really don't know to what extent
mm,
this works in that regard. But basically, though, the bottom line is that it does affect the mid-tone colors, mid-tones of the colors, and not so much the highlights and shadows of the
right.
color areas of the picture. Now, next would normally be warmth, or I like to call it color temperature, but it's not
Right.
it's not in the document here. But I think basically, um, it's pretty much self-explanatory in that if you want to warm up a picture, meaning bring the color temperature up a bit or turn it into more like hues of orange and red and that type of thing, then you slide the slider up and it's great for if you want to really make a sunset picture look more like a sunset. That's a great time to use the warmth slider, bring it up a bit. Or if you want to take a say a night photo and make it look more like change the mood of the image to make it colder, then take the color temperature and bring it down. It turns things more of a bluish color.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for those reasons. And I use it a bit when, especially on a sunrise or a sunset shot. I'll
Yeah.
definitely warm it up with that with the warmth slider.
Also, working around the water can make a big difference
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in terms of, if you want to make it a little cooler, it'll definitely bring out the blues in the water
Yeah.
and may make a little more contrast to the surrounding area.
Yeah. And for snow even too. Like if you want to,
True.
it's
Yeah.
it's bad enough that snow's
Because
cold. If you
because it
want to make it
does
colder,
well, and also we know that snow tends to do blue.
yeah,
You take a
yeah,
picture
oh
of
yeah,
snow, it will get blue, and you can see it's not blue.
right. And
uh
generally, that's on a clear day, that's the reflection of the sky,
right.
um,
So
bouncing
you
off
can
the
actually
snow.
warm it up. Yeah, you can actually warm it up and make the snow white and get a
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
more
neutralize it
clear
a bit.
picture.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, so the next thing that is listed is what's after warmth, and that is tint. Increase the dial, increasing the dial applies a faint magenta tinting, or decreasing it will add green tinting. This is useful for counteracting the subtle green coloration of light reflected through foliage. Um,
Mm,
I don't use tint that much, not in any
I
photo
don't
editor,
either.
to be honest with you. If I
Yeah.
do an auto adjustment and it moves it for me, then fine. But I rarely actually
Where
do move the tint slider on
yeah,
anything.
and I'll say where I think this can be more useful isn't necessarily the coloration, but interior lighting.
Yeah.
Depending on the light you have may give you a tint. There's a difference between compact fluorescent and regular fluorescent and LEDs and different types of LED lights. If you go to a hardware store that sells paint, some of them will have a light that says, here's daylight, here's incandescent, and here's other type of light. And you can move the paint chip from one light to another.
Hmm.
And you're like, these are three different colors
Yeah, yeah.
because and literally they're different colors and the camera will pick that up more than the human eye. So
Oh
by
yeah.
doing the tint, that can do a definite help there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, Next is sharpness.
And this is one that is luckily very succinct on what it does. It basically sharpens the lines, if you will. So if
Mhm.
you have details and lines, it will make those lines sharper, more defined, which can make it look grainy. Overdoing this can get you that overdone look
Yeah, like haloing.
that makes it, yeah, that makes it look fake. Or if you really want to do a stylized, it can almost make it look like a wood block carving
Yeah.
because you're literally making those edges harsh and sharp. And it it's another one you got to be careful for. And at
Yeah.
least on the iPhone, you can go, you don't, this is one of the ones that you don't start in the middle and go left or right. This is when you start at zero and just add more to.
Yeah. And I would pinch to zoom in on a spot
Yeah,
so that you can see how
definitely
it's
watch on
affecting
that.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Because without doing that, you might think you got, a better sharpened image, but if you zoom in on it, you can really tell if you've overdone it or not. So, again, like Dave says, be careful with it and,
And it will
just,
affect your color too. So if you have colors which are kind of blended together and you go into
yeah,
sharpness, and if you increase it, it will get rid of that blending.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
will change the complete look. Where the next thing we're going to talk about, definition, doesn't
Hmm.
do that.
Right.
Definition to me, definition and sharpness have a very similar relation to um um what are we doing? Saturation and vibrance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because both sharpness and saturation are your mallet. I'm going
Hmm.
to adjust this hammer. Whack.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you may need that sometime. Most of the time, you don't want to make that giant whap of a change.
Right. Yeah.
So something like a vibrance or a definition may, okay, so I make it a little bit, make it a little more definition. There's a little bit more difference between here and here, but isn't just sharpening the edges per se.
Yeah. I think what definition does, and again, the definition is not on our document here.
Right.
That's why we're really winging it here. But I think what definition does too is increases the contrast on areas where there's edges in the image. Like if you took a picture of tree
Mm-hmm.
bark, it's got all these edges of, in the texture of the bark, and it's going to increase the contrast in those areas, like especially the darks. It's going to darken the shadow areas of those
Mm-hmm.
little lines of texture. You could try it on a stone or a rock, different things like that. Anything that has texture in it, it's going to increase the contrast in the texture area. Not so much if you have a big blank plain spot. It's not really going to affect that at all. But any areas where there's texture, definition will definitely
Hmm.
basically give them more definition. That's exactly what it's called.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so the other ones that are not listed is noise reduction. So, like if you over sharpened and
Hmm.
you liked what you got, but then now you've introduced a bit of noise in the image, you can back it. You can take some of that noise out with the noise reduction. And have you used that much, Dave? Like, do you find that
I
it?
have, yeah. I
So, in
found
your
it's
experience, does
very,
it?
I would
Go
say
ahead.
it's useful for sometimes low light because low
Yeah.
light can introduce graininess where
Hmm.
I don't want it.
Right.
And the noise reduction will get rid of that.
Now, have you?
Now it does you do lose detail. So if you overdo the noise reduction, it can kind of look a little watercolory.
Yeah. So, do you bring
I
some
just
sharpness back in if you do that? Have you?
um I I play with all three to be honest,
Oh
if I
yeah.
need to. If I will say this, I do definition first and then sharpness, and then if it's a little crunchy look
Hmm.
to it, that's when I'll bring the noise reduction because a lot noise reduction can also work like if parts of the sky are a little
Oh yeah. Yeah.
overdone and it'll just smooth it out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not magic, but it'll smooth it out just a little bit.
Yeah. And you can go too far with that too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like we can
And
say, and I would say that it depends on what you're looking for. Because there are times that you can go wild with these and go max out and sometimes get something very artistic. You're probably not going to get photorealistic, but you're going
yeah.
to get artistic. So it depends on what you want to do,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you know.
true. Um, Next is the final adjustment. And this is one I really love to use, and it's called
Mhm.
vignette. Of course, everybody knows what a vignette is. It kind of darkens around the edges of the frame, and basically it just draws your attention more to the center of the frame, to what's,
Mhm.
perhaps your subject. Um, but be careful with this one too. You can overdo it. You can make it too dark. I like
Yeah.
to make a very subtle vignette adjustment to just
Mhm.
just to give it a little bit of an artistic look to it, not bait, I don't want to make it too dark to the point where you can't see what's on the edge of the frame.
Right.
Um, so um, there's limits to all these adjustments for sure.
Mhm.
And have you used vignette at all, Dave?
I have, and I've also used the white vignetting. If I
Oh
thought
yeah, that's
the
right.
edges, yeah, if I thought the edges of the photo were a little dark,
Yeah.
not the
Hmm.
whole image, just the edges, I can add a little bit. The others, you go the other way, the vignetting, and it brightens that up.
Yes, that's a good
And
point
sometimes
because
you can add a light halo, and that will also, like you said, that helps focus, but sometimes it can help balance, especially around the edges.
yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that because going to the lighter side is something I hardly ever do, but I think it's important to mention because
Yeah.
it could really, especially with a high key image, you don't want to take a high
Hmm.
key image where everything's basically highlighted, and you don't want to put a dark edge around it.
No.
You may want to just give it a little lighter vignette just because it's a high key image, and
Hmm.
it kind of goes along with the theme of the photo. So um that's vignetting it's such a lovely tool to use when you use it right. Like I say, just don't go overboard with it. Of course, take that slider and move it up and down, see what it
Yep.
does, and then settle in with something that suits your taste. All right. So any more on that you want to add to, these adjustments and what they
Uh,
do or anything or
well, I'll say one thing that was introduced with iOS 16 was once you make adjustments and you save them, you can hit the three dots on the upper right, copy the adjustments, select other photos, and then just say, apply those edits to all these other photos.
Yeah, yeah. So you can just
So
copy
that
and
is
paste
a
them.
massive time saver. And that really helps if you're taking a lot of photos in a very similar environment where you work on one and you get the lighting and you get the color. And there's like, let's say 10 other photos you took very close by. Let's say you're going to a museum and you get the lighting and you're like, okay, I've adjusted for the lighting for how dark this room is, this. I like the way it turned out, but I also took 10 other photos around the same time, around the same
Hmm.
area. You can just paste those edits in
Yeah,
and that gets you 90. For sometimes that'll just be, okay, I'm good, I'm done. Other times
yeah,
it'll be,
yeah,
that one was just a little bit different. So I can go in and make, but it gets you most of the way there.
yeah.
And
Or
I
if you're at an
love the fact
event,
they add that edit in. Oh yeah.
yeah, if you're at an event like we talked about on the last
Mm-hmm.
show, and you took a whole pile of pictures of basically the same thing, same lighting conditions and all that stuff, you can do
Mm-hmm.
just that. You can edit one, you can copy those edits and paste them on all the others. Bang, you're done. So quick, so
Yeah.
easy. Yeah, yeah, it's an
Batch editing
awesome
is such
feature.
a great thing. Batch editing
Oh,
is such a
yeah.
great thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. So, well, I hope that kind of enlightens some people on what these functions are, because there's really not a lot out there about them, in my opinion, that you can look them up. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. I guess I've never really looked, but um, I stumbled across this iPhone Life magazine webinar. I don't even know how I found it, but I signed up to watch it, and they went through all these things and put out this PDF, which I think is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, if I could find, I'm not going to promise I can, but if I can find a link to that webinar, I will put it in the show notes. Don't hold me to it, folks. I'll see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, now we're going to get back to our recent photos. So if you are listening to this podcast on the Apple Podcasts app or an app like Overcast, there's a few apps that can do this. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, folks, but Spotify is not one of them. But as we're talking about these pictures, you can look at your phone and you can see the image. It will replace the album cover of the podcast while we're talking about it. So, or if you don't have that feature, you can go to the website. They'll be on there, and you can have a look at them. You can listen live on, or not listen live, but you can listen to the show on the website as well. Anyway, I'm starting to lose my voice. We will go through these. We have three each, and Dave, I'll let you start with your first one, which I
Okay.
think is the one with some clouds. Is that correct?
Okay. Yes. So that one was actually taken at sunset or right before sunset. But unlike a lot of sunset photos where you're always like pointed towards the sunset, this was actually pointed south. I actually had to do
Hmm.
my ordinal directions there. This was actually pointed south. So the sunset is to my right. So
Hmm.
the clouds are getting the kind of the peachy, orangey, sun's off to your right, so it's not dominating the sky. And the trees are just there's a little bit there one's evergreen, and the other ones are just some brownish, reddish brown leaves on it, and the blue sky over there. And I just love the wispy clouds and the way the colors looked.
Yeah.
And this one was edited in the Photos app. So I did not export it to anything else. This was actually edited in the Photos app.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like the pastel colors of the sky and the
Mm-hmm.
clouds, and you can tell by looking at the lower right corner, you can tell that bright spot, that's where the sun's coming from. And there's just enough detail in the silhouette of the house where you can see a vent and you can see the roof line and the fascia of the
Hmm.
roof, and you can even see where the shingles are kind of layered, just at the edge of the silhouette part, which is pretty cool. Like that's picking up some detail right there.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that you've got some, brown, goldy color brown or orangey brown leaves in the top right corner or top left
Hmm.
corner rather. Just to say, hey, this is fall. It's not quite
Yeah.
winter yet.
We aren't quite there yet.
No, that's right. Um, yeah, so that's cool. And you know what? There's a plane leaving its nasty little trail through there. Um, and I
Oh, I
posted a
see it.
yeah, like I posted a picture of a sunset on, I don't know if it was Instagram or where it was one time. Might have been one of the Facebook groups. And I said, this would have been good except for the plane leaving its trail. And one of the
Hmm.
comments was embrace the trail. It's part of it, right? And you
Hmm.
know, they're right. It is part of it. There's a distinctively new trail from a plane going top to bottom,
Yeah.
and from left to right, you can see that's obviously an old one that's starting to drift. In fact, those clouds could very well have been from plane trails or contrails or whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
and the wind has just drifted it. So it's hard to say if it's
Hmm.
actually clouds, a sort of a type of cloud, or just a plane's contrail that it has just started drifting. It could be an
Hmm.
hour old or something. So it's hard to say, but it's just it's a lovely soft look to it. So that's pretty cool.
Thanks, Mike.
So my first one is it's a bit of a shadow play thing. Um, I'm out walking the dog one night, and when I say night, I mean it was only 25 after 6 because it gets dark so early.
Yeah.
Thank you, losing daylight saving time. Um, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna do a little uh, ICM long exposure stuff while I'm walking the dog. And when I'm walking the dog at night, we put this collar on her that lights up so that cars can see,
Hmm.
well, they'll
Oh,
see
yeah.
the light on the dog so that they'll know that I'm there too as well. Um, and I was just coming into the light from a street light, and it was casting her shadow on the ground on the road. And there's the curb and the grass, and I just thought it was really cool that it's such a kind of like an abstract thing, but you can still see that it's a dog walking along, and you can even see the line from the leash. And I got into a spot where it was basically between the trees that where the light was actually lighting the road, and I just thought it was kind of cool. And this was edited in photos where basically all I did was increase the contrast, um, saturated it a little bit, and I think that's about it. I didn't do too much else to it. So, and I should say, the reason I'm walking on the road is because someone in their infinite wisdom, when they built this neighborhood all those years ago, no sidewalks. I don't get it. They're building a residential neighborhood and they don't put any sidewalks in. Well, I'm hearing they're supposed to be adding them,
Mm.
so it's only been like 40 years or more. It's ridiculous.
Uh,
But
there'll be
anyway,
major complaints about people taking away their yard because that's where the sidewalks have to come from.
yeah, yeah, that's probably going to happen. But you know what? If
Hmm.
they want to put it through my front yard, I don't care. The city owns like the first
The
25
easement.
or so
Yeah.
feet from the road to the property line,
Yeah.
so and if they want to put a sidewalk on there, I'm welcoming it because I hate walking on the road. I mean, I almost got hit by a car one time.
Oh, yeah.
And
No, no. I would say this that um, our road is a little cul-de-sac, so not having a sidewalk here is no big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, the only reason to come on this street is you live here because it doesn't go through anywhere. But the main drag, the main road does not have sidewalks,
Oh, really?
and I run it, but it's dangerous.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
would love it if they would put in sidewalks. At least that way you can get to the side roads, and then it's not such of an issue as on the side roads it is on the main road.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
for sure.
it can get a little hairy there.
Yeah. So your next one, speaking of roads, or actually, no.
Yeah,
Well, which one do you want to do next?
you
You
want?
pick.
Well, we can do the roads. Yeah, we'll do the
Okay.
roads. This was taken on, I forget when, last week, during a lunch run, and I just noticed that this road, it kind of ends to like a not necessarily dead end, but it's not a through street.
Okay.
And I was going across it, and I just like the symmetry of the road with the leafless trees on
Hmm.
either side. So I kind of stopped, put my phone right on the ground, did not use the remote feature of the watch, which you could have. I
Yep.
just kind of bent over, got it steady, got the camera centered on not the phone, but got the camera part set, the lens centered
Yeah.
on the between the lines, and just hit the button
Hmm.
and kind of hoped it turned out good,
Yeah.
and then kept up the run. It's not that busy, so it was still a matter of okay, watch my back, look what's
Yeah.
going around, keep your head on a swivel, like you said, and I did do some boosting of the colors here, and basically what we talked about earlier tonight about just tweaking it a little bit to give it a little more punch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and also just because the sun being right there, that kind of dominates the sky. So sometimes you got to reduce the brightness a little bit, and the
Hmm.
brilliance you got to deal with a little bit to deal with that. And like I said, just to boost up like the little red that's left on the bushes on the right, and the green that's in the grass on the left, just to get that, you know, the leading lines going straight ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think, here's what I like about shooting with an iPhone. The sun, as bright as it is, you could still see, I mean, it's got a certain amount of glow to it because the sun is not that big in the sky, but
Mm-hmm.
not too far away, you start seeing detail in the clouds. Like it's not like the sky is completely blown out, right?
Right,
And
right.
what I like about okay, so I love the symmetry at the bottom. You got the lines going up the road. The vanishing point works too. You got the trees on each side, but the sun and those red trees. Okay, so the sun's in the top left, and in the bottom, around the middle, but just below the center, is some red trees. They kind of balance things back out again. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
had there been no trees, no colored leaves on those trees, then I think the sun may have knocked the image out of balance a little bit. But I think the redness in those leaves kind of help balance it out. If the sun wasn't there, then the trees would have knocked it out of balance. So in my eye, I think there's a good balance, overall balance in the image to go along with the symmetry. It's not like it's heavy, heavier on one side than it is the other. Like visually, the visual tension is in the composition is balanced out quite
Mm-hmm.
nicely. Happy accident on your part, maybe, but
Mostly, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, but it really works. And the colors so this was a photo, is that it, was it?
Yeah, this was,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So I mean the coloring and everything else in the image
Well,
is really good. Nice, brilliant
happy, I
yellow
would say
line.
happy accident in time of year, because this was
Yeah.
taken at little afternoon,
Hmm.
like 12:15. But you
Isn't
can
that
see the,
crazy
the
how
sun
low
is
the
not
sun?
exactly, yeah, but I say, and the
It's
sun is not straight overhead. The sun is at a nice
yeah.
like 50-degree angle to the horizon, let's say.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So yeah, you're not even though it is high noon, it is not high noon.
No, I mean, had this been June, yeah, it would have been high noon.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, it would have been
but
straight
yeah,
over the road.
it's really interesting how that works. But you
Hmm.
know, and of course, you've got your complimentary planes flying through the scene.
Well, I don't know if the top one is a plane. Yeah, I guess it is a plane. I wasn't sure if it was a plane or a because it almost goes right through the sun,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or it
You'd
looks
almost
like
think
it
it's
goes
like a
through the
lens
sun.
flare,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the
Yeah,
like
but
the
it'd be
J.J.
a weird.
Abrams.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that's cool. It's a well non thought out image because you didn't well you thought it through for sure, but the way it's balanced out with the sun and that tree, like the red tree, I think it's a really clever shot, and you know I like it. So my second one is one that I took about 25 minutes after I took the first one because it was cold that night. And so this is a macro shot of the marshmallows after I plunked them down into
Ooh.
some hot chocolate.
Okay, I wasn't sure if this was hot chocolate or if this was coffee.
Yeah, no, it's hot chocolate. I haven't had coffee in over 2 years.
Mm.
And but yeah, this is just a cup of hot chocolate. It's got all nice and foamy on top. And I have a picture. I was gonna use it of the marshmallows before I sunk them in. But I thought this one made for a better macro shot because in the bubbles you can see the light fixture on the ceiling above it, right above the table. You know, we were just sitting
Oh, I
down
see that
to
now. If you zoom
yeah, yeah,
in, you have to zoom in, but yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And so this was just with the iPhone macro setting or whatever. And I'm finding that the 15 Pro Max is doing a better job than the 14 Pro Max did with the built-in macro. It's got better um, focus fall off, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
The 14 Pro Max I thought found would have left more of this in focus, and I didn't like that. With a lens, you get a lot of fall off. You know, it gets really blurry by
Hmm.
the edge of the image. Um, which is really cool. But if you don't want to have that much blur, and if you use just the macro function, this works quite well. It's a lot better. I think they've really improved on how much blur it gives. As you go away from the focal point. So, uh,
Hmm.
yeah, and I think this was just a photos edit as well. I think. Let me see if it says where it was saved from. I'm
And I
looking
will
on
say
them.
this. One thing you may want to try if when you see this image, if you do a screenshot and really crop in on the bubbles, it really kind of throws your mind for a loop of what you're looking at. Doing
Yeah,
doing what macro does best in terms of removing any idea what you're looking at on a
yeah, yeah.
photo.
Really making it abstract.
And
Yeah,
you're like,
I've
okay,
just zoomed in on it, and
am I looking at a crater? Am I looking at who knows?
yeah, really. Yeah, yeah, it's weird, eh? So yeah, that's just my hot chocolate bubbles with mushrooms, or not mushrooms, marshmallows,
Oh,
uh,
I would say that would be
sunk into it.
that would be a unique way to do hot chocolate, but
Oh, that'd be gross, wouldn't it? So moving on to your next one, your
yeah,
last
like
one
yeah,
here, it's very
yep,
colorful.
yes. This was actually a stand of trees, and this was me throwing in multiple filter apps.
Now, I
I'm
gotta tell you before you go any further,
mhm.
I thought this was a stained glass window.
That's yep, that's what I was going for. That's
Well,
what I was
you
going
got
for.
there.
Yeah, the black lines are trees, and most of the horizontal straight lines are the branches.
Yeah.
The very small lines are the ones that were added in.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's one of these ones where I want to say possibly Visionist, Art Card, Lightroom Mobile,
Hmm.
a combination of all of them,
Yeah.
multiple times. Sometimes I'll throw something in Lightroom Mobile first, throw it into the apps, and then throw it back into Lightroom Mobile.
Hmm.
But after the first couple of tries of looking at it, um, it just started to look, like you said, it started to look like stained glass. And I
Yeah.
thought, well,
Oh, it
I'll run
does.
with it.
Yeah.
And like I said, it looks like you're taking a picture of stained glass, but it's barren trees
Yeah.
with some shrubbery down below. But it's pretty much barren trees, and it was a bluish sky. But
But
there was enough variation.
yeah, this takes a stick season picture and makes it interesting.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Trying to make
You
something a
know?
little different going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I did. I thought it was stained glass because, and the reason I
Mm-hmm.
thought that is because you put a picture on, I think it was today, of a stained
Yep.
glass window. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, okay, maybe this is a close up of a certain part of it or something.
Nope.
It's wow, that's really cool. Um, you know, I kind of figured it was trees, but I still thought it was a stained glass window, and and then now it's got me wanting to play around with Visionist and things like that to see what I can do. Because I've got some pictures of trees that are otherwise, in my opinion, pretty mundane. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can make something interesting out of them after all. So,
Give it a
you know,
try. Give it a try.
yeah, well played. So my last one is so this boat is a ferry that stays in town here for the winter. Um, I live at the southern tip of Georgian Bay, and if you go north, first if you go west a little bit and then north, you go right up the Bruce Peninsula, and there's a little town up there called Tobermory, and this ferry takes people from from Tobermory across the top part of the bay to a place called South Baymouth, where you can then venture into northern Ontario. Instead of driving all the way around Georgian Bay, this is an actual shortcut. I think by the time if you went from where I live, in Sound, by the
Mm-hmm.
time you go to Tobermory, get on the boat, go across the bay, and get off at South Baymouth, you might cut an hour or so off time wise of the drive around because the drive around would probably take you about 5 or 6 hours. However,
Ooh,
you have the joy of relaxing on the boat as you go
that's
across.
true. You're not
So
you're not driving, you're not having to pay attention to
yeah, so if
everything.
you're going on a holiday or something like that, you're not going to exhaust yourself driving around um, when you can just it's about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes from here to Tobermory, and then I forget how long it takes the boat to go across, but I think it's less than an hour.
Oh,
But
okay, it's
there's
not too
the
bad then.
loading and unloading and all that stuff. It takes time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, so that's what this boat is, and it's a really nice boat. It's all decorated up with these, um, you know, native designs and stuff like that. Um, I'm going to get a picture of this from the front at some point. But what
Mm-hmm.
what caught my eye here was I was parked down by the waterside here, and the way the sun was setting and the clouds are moving, I thought, oh, I got to get a picture of this. So I got out and I took a 15-second reheld shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blends the clouds, makes them look like a kind of like a thick watercolor painting or maybe even an oil painting.
Mm-hmm.
And the water itself is all nice and smoothened out, but then all the details of the ship and and the harbor walkway and everything else is all still pretty clear. So it's kind of a hard, soft image, I guess, for lack of better
Mm-hmm.
terms. And I did this one in Lightroom Mobile. I used a preset and it was one of the, I want to say, winter presets. I'm not sure. And it gave me a look that I liked, and then I just kind of had to, you know, tweak it a little bit here and there. But
Sure.
but that's, this boat is, to give you an idea of how big it is, it's 300, and I remember this, and you'll know why as soon as I say it. 365 feet long.
Okay.
So there's 365 days in the year. That's how I
Wow.
remember it. It's 365 feet long. And I forget how many cars it holds, but we've been on
Wow.
it a couple of times, and it's a nice boat to be on. I went on kind of a little tangent here, but I went on what they call the fall cruise. And what that is when it's coming home for the winter, you can take a bus trip up to Tobermory, get on the boat, and come down and look at all the nice fall colors from the trees, along the shoreline and everything else, and just have a nice, boat ride home. They've got
Hmm.
a kitchen in there and whatnot, and you can buy food or whatever. And the last time I did that, I mean, you buy your tickets ahead of time, or you're not going to get on.
Mm.
So we bought
Okay.
our
Okay.
tickets and we went on this boat, and I was so sick with a cold after
Oh,
that
oh,
trip
heck.
because it was a miserable,
Oh.
rainy day. The colors were nothing to look at. And stupid me, I went out onto the deck and I was taking pictures anyway. This was back when I had my Canon camera. That's how long ago it
Oh,
was. And
okay.
I,
Oh,
I got
wow.
rid of that in
Okay, so we're talking
2016.
significant amount of time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is probably 10, 12 years ago. But I got so sick. So I'm never going to buy another ticket to the fall cruise because you just don't know what kind of weather you're going to get. But anyway, that's a little story about the boat. But
Mm.
it's a real nice addition to our harbor, our inner harbor. And sometimes we get lake freighters come in for the winter, and they can make interesting pictures too. But this is really cool to take pictures of at night. And this was at 20 after 4 in the afternoon yesterday. And you can
Okay.
see that the lights are on around the decks. So I'm going to go down one of these nights when after dark, well, that could be early evening, and get a nice night shot of this thing. And maybe even from the same angle or something, and see how that turns out. But yeah, it's just a 15-second shot. That's why the sky looks so blurry and everything else is fairly clear. So, all right, well, that is our recent photos. And I had something in mind for the next show. And do you think I can remember what it is, Dave?
It was using the built-in camera app, I believe, and
Oh,
comparing
yes.
it to third-party apps. And why would you use one versus the other?
Yeah. So
And the
that's
strength and weaknesses of difference.
Yeah, so that's tentatively what our next show could be about. If something better comes along, then we'll talk about that. But at this point, we're gonna, maybe kind of look at the differences between the native camera app and third-party apps and why you'd maybe want to use them. So stay tuned for that. All right. Well, I guess that's it.
Mhm.
Let's tell everybody where they can find you.
Sure. You can find me pretty much everywhere on social media as Prof Pod, except for TikTok, where I'm Prof Pod PGH, and on the Facebook group as Dave Podner Jr.
All righty. And you can find me on the Facebook group, just with my name, Greg McMillan. And the website for the podcast is iPhoneography.ca. There's links in the show notes to all our social things and all that stuff. And oh, Dave, Dave just sent me a picture of my hot chocolate bubbles. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is crazy good. So this is going to be the cover picture on the blog post for the website because it's got both of our hands in it. I
There we
took the
go.
picture and Dave did the edit on it. And I can't even describe what this looks like, but it's really cool.
To
That'd
me,
make
it
good
has a
wallpaper.
science. Oh yeah, it has a science fiction feel to it.
It does. Folks, you're gonna have to go to the website and check this out.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at your phone right now, it'll be on there. It's just really cool. That's awesome. But yeah, the website's iPhoneography.ca. You can find me at about.me/McMillan. That's where all my links are. But just on the show notes for this episode on the phone or on the website, that's where you'll find Dave and I in our social links and whatnot. So, all right, well, I guess we got ourselves a show, and I guess we'll see everybody on the next one.
Have a great one, everyone. Well, and I would say it depends on the type of mushrooms you're talking about.
Yeah, really.
Do you feel like having a little bit of a trip? I'm sure there's mushrooms you can add.
There's mushrooms
do a little
for that.
micro. Yeah, you can do a little micro dosing.
Yeah.
And then I fried up some onions, garlic, mushrooms, in a pan, put that in there, put some seasoning in there, kind of mix it all up together and made like a stir skillet like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You see, you're making me hungry again.
The only thing I really, really dislike is celery.
Oh, yeah?
Not in soup. Like, I know you need celery in soup and soup. Okay, that's fine. But like people who can just say, like, I'm having celery with peanut butter. Yum.
Yeah. See, my dad would live off celery if he could. He just loves it. He says God made celery for him.
Makes me sick to my stomach.
Really?
It makes me sick to my stomach. The celery, raw celery, just I cannot handle it. One time he made hamburgers with onions in them, chopped up onions. And he had to tell me, and this is when I was like 6 or so, they were flavor buds because I disliked onions that much.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until I was like 9 or 10 that I didn't realize that onion rings, like at Burger King, or like, fast food, onion rings were made from onions. The little kid mind. They're onion rings because they're shaped like onions. They have onion flavoring, but they're not real onions. No, they're real onions in there.
Well, I gotta go get something to snack on because you made me hungry.
I made you hungry.
All right, so I kept recording because I could use some of this as bloopers. We'll have to see.
Oh yeah, no problem. No problem.
Some of it make good bloopers. I was thinking before we go, sometime I'd like to do a live show.